part two of Christology, because we took a break and we're back at it here. And I want to talk to you guys just a little bit, and then this is going to end the Christology section. I want to talk to you about the Christophanies that we talked a little bit about. And we dealt with and what is a Christophany? It's the appearings of the Lord, okay? And you wouldn't just say in Old Testament. You also may consider that a Christophany would be an appearing of the Lord after the incarnation. Okay? And we're going to deal with one of those here in just a little bit, because I believe that it is extremely profound. Now, we do not adhere to the idea of reincarnation. We know that Jesus was incarnate, and to be incarnate essentially means that he became flesh and he dwelt among us. It is a person who embodies in the flesh a deity and that's basically just a generalized definition. No. Intentionally. I warned you from the beginning. Sometimes I'll give you notes, sometimes I won't. It means, incarnation means, literally means embodied in the flesh. And so reincarnation is to be re-embodied. And so we understand that the Hindus believe in this. And we're dealing with Christology specifically in the study of Christ. We mention reincarnation as, that's why they don't kill their cows. That's, the old sacred cow thing is that, because they believe that this is one form that their ancestors come back as cows. And that's why you'll see them, their poor things are skinny as they can be, walking down the street, barely alive. And I used to think, man, if you really believe that's your grandfather, maybe you should feed the thing. I mean, your grandpa cow is starving over here. At least feed him, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you really believe this stuff. But anyway, that's just some humor. But Jesus was incarnate. He entered into the carnal, or the flesh. And this is fundamental. Yes, did you have a question? This is very, very foundational. If you don't believe that, then the rest of it kind of just crumbles. I mean, we have to believe this. And so I want to talk to you about some of these, what are called Christophanies. And, the one that I want to talk about is, how many of you remember when Jesus rose from the dead? Wasn't that great? Huh? That was good stuff, right? And that is also fundamental. John chapter 20. And verse 11. But Mary stood without at the sepulchre, weeping, and as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, or the grave, and seeth two angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet where the body of Jesus had lain. And they saith unto her, Woman, isn't it funny how Woman, why weepest thou? She saith unto them, Because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. And when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? Whom seekest thou? Who are you seeking? She, supposing him to be the gardener, saith unto him, Sir, if thou have borne him hence, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus saith unto her, Mary. She turned herself and saith unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. It's interesting. He talked to her. She still didn't know who he was. But when he called her name, there must have been a way Jesus said Mary that so affected her that all of a sudden her eyes were open and she realized who it was. But let's talk about this for a minute, because she's standing there talking to him and thought he was a gardener. I mean, what did he have? A shovel in his hand? I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, we understand that the service of a gardener would be acceptable and understandable in this environment where he was buried. But it's interesting that she was looking at him, but she did not know that it was him. So what about him was different? Anybody want to offer a suggestion? Pardon me? Okay. He retained his what? His scars. His hair turned white. Of course, that's certainly how John saw him. Hair white as wool, eyes of fire. That's how he's seen in the book of Revelation. Anything else? You guys recall that in this resurrected state that he went before his disciples, and even they had doubt, and he said, "Here's my hands. Touch my scars." And in one case, he reach hither thy finger and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand and thrust it into my side. Put your hand in my side. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? And be not faithless. Ooh. You imagine Jesus saying that to you? Put your hand in my side. Don't be faithless. Believe. And Thomas answered and said unto him, My Lord and my God. Jesus saying, Thomas, because you've seen me, you have believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. But in another gospel account, Jesus actually asked for food, and they gave him a piece of broiled fish. So he ate. Well, I mean, obviously it's not recorded. There's nothing said about it, but I mean, we could make presumptions and we could make assumptions about that. Yes, sir. He's got the scars to prove it. Yeah. So I think that we should talk about this. We're talking about the study of Christ, right? So let's go to verse 17. Here's one we're going to talk about. He says, Mary, she turns and sees him. Verse 17, Jesus said unto her, what did he say? What did he say? Why did he say, touch me not? What did he say? Don't touch me. I'm not yet ascended to my Father. Yes or no? Okay. Now go on down to verse 27. Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side. Mary, do not touch me, because I have not ascended to my Father. But to the disciples, put your hand in my side, touch me. Pardon me? Do not cling. Hmm? Okay, so you're saying the reason that he told her not to touch him is because she didn't doubt him, and the reason he told them to touch him is because it was to prove to them that he was who he said he was, but he still had not done. At least there's no biblical account of the fact that he had ascended. Now, this word haptomai in the Greek language, it says, do not adhere to me, do not cling to me, do not attach yourself to me. And it does reveal something interesting about this. Because you would not suspect that there would be a time when Jesus would tell someone, do not attach yourself to me. But here he's saying, don't attach yourself to me. Why would he tell her not to cling to him? What was so important about him having to go to the Father that she could not attach herself to him? So you think that between the time he talked to Mary and the time that he was with the disciples, he ascended and he came back? I don't think so. Mounce, who is, someone who wrote a lexicon, he describes this as, in here, to bring into contact. So there was a physical component to this. And the reason that I bring this question up is because this is something I've never heard anybody preach about this. The time in between the time he rose and Mary saw him, and then the time that he had, and Joseph said, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Is that what you said? Preach about it tomorrow? Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm excited about it. But the reason I think there's significance here, and I agree with you, I believe that from the time he saw her, I believe that he ascended, and then when he was here, and here's why I believe that had to happen. Because Jesus spent significant time after his resurrection with the disciples, teaching them and preaching to them about the kingdom of God. And interacting with them and exchanging, I believe, even physical exchange, whether it was touching in some manner or not. But we see here where it's now allowed. And I believe that there was that transpired in between there. So, assuming that this is the case, how did he ascend? Nobody wants to take a shot at it? Go to Luke chapter 24. And we're probably going to end with this particular story. Verse 1. Now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came into the sepulchre, and bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them. And they found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre, and they entered in and found not the body of the Lord Jesus. And it came to pass, as they were much perplexed thereabout, behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. And it says, and as they were afraid, and bowed down their faces to the earth, they said unto them, why seek ye the living among the dead? Great question, isn't it? He is not here, but he's risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was yet in Galilee, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, and be crucified, and the third day rise again. And they remembered his words, and returned from the sepulchre, and told all these things unto the 11, and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene, and Joanna, and Mary the mother of James, and the other women that were with them, which told these things unto the apostles. And their words seemed them as idle tales, and they believed them not. Then arose Peter, and ran into the sepulchre, and stooping down, he beheld the linen clothes laid by themselves, and departed, wondering in himself at that which was come to pass. Now, this is interesting here. And behold, two of them went into the same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs, and they talked together of all these things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he said unto them, what manner of communications are these that you have to one with another as you walk and are sad? And the one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answering said unto him, art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things which are come to pass in the last couple days? And he said unto them, what things? And they said unto him, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty indeed, in a word and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death, and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been which he should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre, and they found not his body. What does it say? What's it say? What did I just read? And they found not his body. Now here's one of the things I want to bring up. The story in John is that Mary was there. She looks, and there's two angels there, right? And then Jesus is there, and they ask her, "Why are you weeping for?" Was Jesus risen from the dead? Was he risen from the dead? Well, it's interesting because John says that Mary looks at this guy, thinks he's a gardener, but it's actually Jesus, and she sees him. Luke's telling kind of a different story. He's not telling the same kind of story, because Luke's story is that when Mary and the others went there, he wasn't there. And that they said, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" And they ran back and said, "He's alive." But there's no mention of the fact that Mary had a conversation with him. And here it says that when they went there, his body wasn't there. Let's keep reading. Bible doesn't contradict itself, by the way. And it says here, and when they found not his body, they came saying that they also had seen a vision of angels, which has said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre and found it even so. The women had said, but him they saw not. But him they saw not, the women, nor the men. Nobody saw him. Then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? Somebody tell me what they think that means. Ought Christ not to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? Yeah. Yeah. He ascended. And here's the reason I'm bringing this up. Because we'll deal with this in eschatology a little bit more. But there are so many people that believe that when he lifted off the earth in Acts and the angel said, why stand ye gazing? That this was the first time that this happened. And I don't believe that it is the first time that it happened. Okay? And I'm just dropping this in the bucket now. We'll deal with it later. But there's something really interesting here. And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, Moses meaning the writings of Moses, not just Moses himself, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning. He's there. He's in the Old Covenant. He's in the Old Testament. He's right there. And this is, imagine these two guys. I would have loved to have been a part of this conversation. I would have loved to have heard Jesus explain where he is and how he's revealed in Moses and the prophets. Because from my perspective, I can show you many places where I see him, but this would have been a conversation that I would have given my right arm to be a part of. Right? And they drew nigh unto the village, and whither they went, and he made as though he would have gone further. He was going to keep going. And they constrained him. Abide with us, for it is toward the evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to tarry with them. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, that he took the bread, and he blessed it, and he brake it, and he gave them, and their eyes were open. What opened their eyes? When he took the bread, and he blessed it, and all of a sudden, there's something that connected with them. Their eyes were open. Now watch this. What happened when their eyes were opened and they knew him? What did he do? What did he do? Let me give you this word, okay? Aphantos. 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 The Greek word. Aphantos. Or aphantos. You know what it means? He became invisible. You know what it doesn't mean? It doesn't mean that he went anywhere. He just couldn't be, he wasn't visible anymore. Verse 32, and they said one to another, do not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scripture? And they rose up at the same hour, and they returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 gathered together, and them that were with them, saying, the Lord is risen indeed, and hath appeared to Simon. And they told what things were done in the way, and how he was known of them in breaking of bread. And as they thus spake, Jesus stood in the midst of them, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. But they were terrified and frightened, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. It's not the first time they saw Jesus and thought he was a spirit. Another one of the Gospels tells you that they were shut up because they were afraid, and they had closed themselves off, and that the doors were shut. And this is where people think he walked through the wall. But I'll tell you what I believe. I believe when they knocked on that door and those two guys, Cleopas and the other guy, walked in the door, I think he walked in with them. But because he was invisible, they didn't see him. And the moment they began to testify, and the moment they began to speak the word, he appeared. And I believe today that Christ, in most cases in our lives, is invisible. But when we begin to speak the truth, and when we begin to speak the word, and we begin to declare, he appears again. Not in a way in which we look at his beard and see his hands and see his feet, but in such a dynamic way that you know that the Spirit of the Christ is here. And so I want to just say to you as we get ready to close this part of the class, we could literally exhaust this subject over weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. But hopefully we've gained enough understanding in these last 4 sessions of who he is. He's fully God, he's fully man. And that what many would call a Christophany is nothing more than Christ appearing. He's not being incarnated again, but he is appearing. Whether it was Old Testament, whether it's after his death and his resurrection, he's still appearing. And I believe that when this idea that when he shall appear, that we shall be like him, I don't necessarily believe that that is when the eastern sky splits. I believe that we become more like him every time there's an appearing of him in our lives. Because where is Christ appearing? Go to Revelation chapter 1. The revelation of Jesus Christ. And as he begins to reveal himself, he reveals himself in the midst of the golden candlesticks. Are you with me? And what are those golden candlesticks? They are the church. He is appearing in his church. He's not appearing in what we call his church, that isn't his church, but he is appearing in the midst of his church. And he is still appearing. He didn't just appear then, he's still appearing now. And when he appears and we see, how do we see him? How do we identify him? Where 2 or more are gathered in my name, he said, there I am. His appearing is through his church. His appearing is in the love that we have for each other. We are the greatest representation, and we are actually the ones who are manifesting the Spirit of Christ in the earth by the way that we bind together in covenant, love one another. He said, they'll know that you're my disciples, not by how good you preach, not by how many scriptures you quote, not by how good you pray, but by your love for one another. And so as we move into this, we can actually continue to manifest the Spirit of Christ in the earth today to the same degree that he manifested in flesh then. We can manifest him in spirit right now in the times in which we're living. And that's a beautiful thing. And I believe that when he walked into that room with them, the moment they began to talk about him, he showed up. And I believe that what we got to remember is that even though we don't necessarily see him, when we start talking to people about him, he always shows up. God bless you guys. Yep. Anybody have any questions before we go?